At the last minute, they decided they couldn't play Darth Vader with an English accent, which is why James Earl Jones was brought in. So, as I said, I've had the experience, and it was a very happy experience of the two films.
He's the new kid on the block.
Yeah, I was quite excited about being participating in The Empire Strikes Back for a few reasons. I mean, how do you turn down a Star Wars anyway? I mean, it's such an incredible phenomenon. But I also wanted to work with Kershner, and I wanted to work with Lucas, and because I regard them as I mean, it's very peculiar to say this while everybody's sitting here, but I sort of regard them as a new breed or a special breed of filmmaker. To me, future people. But when Kirsch and I got together and Kirsch told me the name of the character, I really got very excited about that. I thought Lando Calrissian was really, was really good. And then he started talking about Zen, which also interests me. And I don't know, I just went with an instinct. But I'm very happy I went with that instinct.
Yes.
Mick Martin from the Sacramento Union. In the history of movie making, sequels have not been noted for their ability to outdo the original or to even match it. In this case, I think we have an exception, but I wonder if there was ever a time during the planning of the movie that you felt maybe it'd be another sequel.
Well, the original idea was that there was too much story material to tell in one film, and if Star Wars happened to do well enough, we might consider making another one. This was before the film came out. And so the idea of doing a sequel to capitalize on the success of the first one was never really the basic instinct. It was to continue the story, to tell more of the story and have the characters develop. In that sense, it is definitely not a sequel. It's the second act of a trilogy. I think that was the most positive thing about it. Unfortunately, most sequels are made with, not that the idea is bad, it's just the attitude of the people who are going in to make it. And I think we tried to avoid some of those pitfalls and tried to do a film that stood on its own and furthered the characters from the first film.
I'd like to know the authorship of one line and what Mr. Kershner's reaction is to it. The Yoda, the font of all wisdom, says, if my notes are correct, clear your mind of questions. There is no why. Now, I'm curious about who the author of that is and what Mr. Kershner's reaction is to that remark.
Yoda's dialogue is fascinating for me. It's been worked on probably more carefully than any other dialogue in the film. There was much more dialogue for Yoda, but in the process of tightening the picture, of course, it was reduced and compressed to what I felt was the essence. That's a very important line for me, as are some of the other lines that he says, like, there is no try, either do or do not. These lines are very close to me. They're part of what I believe, if I believe in anything, which I don't believe in. But that is a very significant line. There is no why. You can, I feel that Yoda has reached a plane of enlightenment which is rare for us poor mortals on this planet in this particular galaxy. And I personally have learned a lot from Yoda. And I wish I could meet him sometime and just really have a conversation with him.
That line is important to be said in the United States today, that
Pardon?
There is no, in effect, but you're saying that's a line that says, don't ask questions.
No, it's not saying don't ask questions. It's saying ask all the questions in the world. Ask every question you can.
Clear your mind of questions.
At this particular moment, clear your mind of questions and create some space in your mind so that you might learn something. That's what he's saying. He's talking about inner space.
Thank you. Yes. Daniel Gibson from the Albuquerque News. I'd like to address this to the cast in general. Various people, could they explain why they think the film is so popular?
I think Yoda can best answer that.
Well, in my own personal opinion, I'm a married man with 3 children, and I personally think that Star Wars really brought family entertainment back to the cinema. I got sick and tired of looking down through the cinemas, you know, what's on at the various cinemas, to find out that it was nothing else but sex films and very, very violent films and bloodthirsty films and things like this that I couldn't take my kids to. And it struck me as being a peculiar sort of parallel, whereby you had, every time Sound of Music appeared, anywhere in Great Britain, for instance, the actual cinemas would be absolutely jam-packed. People were actually looking for something which they could go to as a family, and Star Wars did just this, brought family entertainment back to the cinema.
Also, I think there was a real lack in people's lives. There's no new mythology. The Western, I've seen George Lucas say, was the last sort of type of entertainment that had heroes, and I mean heroes that are in a galaxy a long time ago and far away can be just that. I mean, if it has anything to do with Earth, he will be a hero to a certain segment of the population, but not to others. So it was that, I think it just filled a void. It's only a theory, but it's mine.
I'd like to just try to answer that in another way. I think to try to answer that logically or rationally is very difficult. Assuming that the film works on an entertainment level, we put that aside. It has to work on that level. But I think it works on other levels which go way beyond rational explanation. The film has roots in fairy tales and mythology that goes way back into our history. And you notice that children will continue to read fairy tales and get a great deal out of them, but will not be able to explain really why they're getting so much out of them. They just want them repeated all the time. They want all the horror of the fairy tale. They want all the dreamlike quality. There is a release of tension, probably, and psychiatrists and philosophers and all try to explain fairy tales and myths, and all have interesting explanations which go along with their system of beliefs. But the film does have roots in that thing that we, quote unquote, call the unconscious, the irrational. And because of that, I think it has an appeal that goes way beyond the entertainment. This doesn't make it pretentious, because if we had made it too apparent, if we had put it up front and said, look how clever we are, that we're making a great myth, I think it would be pretentious. But it's not, because it's buried and it's there, and you can think about it afterwards and even talk about it and maybe even dream about it, I hope.
Yes.
Art Lang, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I wonder how the good guys feel about the bad guy being such a popular hero.
Come on, good guy.
The kids so much.
And
Darth Vader, I mean.
why do they enjoy him so much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, remember him well.
I don't know, you can't have good guys without a bad guy to balance against.
They like the good guy, or they like the bad guy.
I think they like to use him in games. I think they enjoy playing with the notion of a bad guy so bad that nobody even knows what he does, basically. It's not a, he's not a creature of our culture. He's beyond that. He's a mythic symbol to kids. I mean, we're two different kinds of good guys here, Mark and I. But without the balance of his character, you couldn't have mine. It all works together. It's an ensemble relationship.
David? I'm the bad guy. I don't comment on this.
Mark?
Yes, excuse me.
Bill Kearns with the newspaper in Lubbock. The questions come up several times about being 3 films of the second trilogy, but I think what I'm interested in most is the fact that the second film is used so much as a pre-sell, I guess, for the third. You've got an unresolved character at the end. You've got that strange little quote from Yoda as well about there is another last hope as well. Was this planned from the very start to have these question marks at the end of the film, and has there been any sort of adverse reaction at all to the film being
There was an adverse reaction from me. What do you mean there is another? Makes me look like I had my agent call up and ask for $70 zillion or something, you know what I mean? And it's not a Christopher Reeve situation, you know? But George assured me that that had always been his intention. So I can only speculate as to what that means. But I trust that he was being honest with me. I believe he was being honest with me, that that had always been a part of the storyline. But you sort of like to think of yourself as the only hope.
That's not, that aspect of the story really isn't something that will come up in the third part. It's a longer range projection. No.
I'd like to just answer that for a moment. Actually, there has been much comment about that. But actually, the second act of every play is an advertisement for the third act, if you want to think of it that way.
Yes, sir. David Aarons.
Wait, before you go on any further, the principal focus of the latter half of the story, however, Luke's confrontation with Vader and his realization that he is not quite ready yet and he must complete his training before he can be ready, is really the focus of the part of the story that is resolved there. It is, because it is a second act, it was really impossible to tie up all of the loose ends in the story, especially the key element, the search and rescue of Han Solo, which is the key part of the third part, so that there really isn't any way to end the second act the same way you would end the first act. Otherwise, you end up making a carbon copy of the first film, which is something we didn't want to do. It was a risk. It isn't done very often, but it was necessary for this story.
David Ernstein, Herald Examiner. That's sort of in line with what I wanted to ask about, because even though this isn't properly a sequel exactly, but a continuation of the same story, it's a very dark film, and the whole spirit of it is completely different from the first, which could be, the first film could actually be called an adventure comedy, whereas this is a very dark film. It has very psychological overtones. The characters are coming on in a very different way. We're finding out more about them, and I was wondering, in terms of the conception, did it ever occur to you who were involved in it of risking losing an audience that had been accustomed to a different kind of structure that actually you could have continued doing very slight variations on ad infinitum?
That's right. The easiest thing to do would have made a carbon copy of the first film, but there's no point in doing that.
I think it has enough of the elements that people liked. The combination of the technology with the snap, would it help if I got out and pushed and all that kind of nonsense? So it satisfies to a certain degree, but I think we're all proud of the fact that it doesn't, and it never intended to deliver the same experience.
Very often a so-called sequel is what we call a rip-off. They have an audience, and they say, well, it worked that time. Now, let's spend a little less money and quickly rush out another film and get it out there and get that audience in. Really, this is not a sequel in that way. It is a continuing story, and it's a second act. The second act really is where the problems are shown in all their full complexity. And the third act will I think, be brighter again, because it'll have a climax which will be romantic and satisfying and bring things to a very satisfactory conclusion for that part. I think it's a necessary coloring for this particular film. And if some people feel they want more of the first one, I think they'll have to go see the first one or see some of the copies that have been made.
St. Louis Globe Democrat. What is the status of the third act? Have the principal roles been cast, or?
The script is being worked on now, and the rest of the production details really can't be set until that is more or less finalized.
There's a title. Yeah.
There's a working title, The Revenge of the Jedi.
Sounds like we're making Pink Panther movies with all these strikes backs and revenges popping around.
Mick Martin, Sacramento Union. For Mark Hamill, there was a car accident prior to the film. I wondered, you're mauled so much in the movie, and there are several scenes where you look as if you could have been actually physically hurt. Was that makeup, or was some of that shot after the accident?
No, the accident happened like 3 years ago.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sure the makeup man built upon where the scars that remain from the accident were, because that would be just a good makeup man.
It looked more real than usual in this case.
Well, no, it was just a good makeup job.
Okay.
But they did disappear rapidly, you'll notice.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Miss Fisher, has she got any say in with which of the men she ends up?
Another dissatisfied customer, huh?
Satisfied, but I'm wondering how she'll feel.
I've requested they both be put into carbon freeze and made into one person. So I have a nice guy and the scoundrel together.
And you get that next hope.
I think so. Gary?
I wouldn't rule the Wookiee out of the question completely.
And Yoda's cute, too.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the principal actors and actress, because Star Wars and Empire are such special effects movies, did you not, certainly at first, feel somewhat silly making motions with guns that nothing came out of? Somebody came up and told you there was going to be a flash of light. Is it different being an actor and actress in a special effects movie from something where there is not such animation?
Well, the risk of acting silly is something that an actor takes for granted. You face that every day you get up and go to work, and you face no more risk of being silly in a special effects movie than in one you're required to pretend you're doing something else. The job is exactly the same.
I can't ever forget the look on the faces of these Norwegian skiers as I was fleeing from those big walking machines, terrified, you know. It was like... But they always let us see drawings. I mean, we're never asked to do anything completely blind. And like in the cockpit of the snow speeders and so forth, you're up on a rostrum and there's a lot of bored technicians sort of rocking you, and you look out and you see people doing crossword puzzles and having tea and so forth. And you do for a moment say, gosh, I'm a grown-up and this is my job. What do I tell my son, you know? But at the moment, right at the moment when you're doing it, you've got to believe. And you do.
Good time for one more question.
I had a question for Irvin. Actually, two quick ones. First, I was wondering exactly how involved George was with you on the directing of the film. And secondly, it's obviously the biggest picture you've ever worked on, and probably one of the biggest pictures anyone's ever worked on. Do you have any desire to do something this big again, or do you want to gear back down now?
No, I enjoy working on big pictures, and I also love small ones. When it comes with George's involvement in the directing, there was absolutely none. I wouldn't have taken the job had I felt that somebody was going to be standing over my shoulder and second-guessing me. this was understood right from the beginning. And George is much too intelligent and experienced a director to ever do this. No, the involvement was on a producing, actually executive producing, because Gary did the real producing. He was there making sure that those 64 sets were ready when they were supposed to be ready, and that was no small job, of one of thousands of jobs. George was the story man, and if I had any real problems, I was going to make some big changes, I would call George in California, and we would have a discussion, and he might call Larry Kasdan, and we'd have a three-way, four-way conversation. I'd be talking to Gary, because there were lots of problems that came up. You can't, no matter how well I planned this picture, and it was planned out pretty thoroughly for months in advance, you have to make changes. Small changes, I would make them. I mean, I had great freedom on this picture. But large changes which affected the story or could affect the next story, that's really where I felt I had to call George. I said, George, I'd like to do this and this, but you know what? What do you have planned for the next story? Are you going to do that? And he says, oh my gosh, yes, I've been thinking about that. Well, I better not do that because it's going to affect it. That's where we had to really be careful because it is an ongoing series.
Thank you very much. What we'd like to do now is members of the print will move towards the back of the room where the tables are there to meet with the principals. And those members of the TV, if you'd walk straight back through there to stage 22? Yes. And you'll be taken care of back there. Thank you so much. I'm on, huh?